It's interesting because this raises a number of questions around accountability as well, because if I am embedded into finance and I am responsible for essentially collecting the data and visualizing and creating reports and telling stories, frankly, with data, I have a ton of domain knowledge. I have clean data, hopefully. But when that is not clean, I have an issue. I can't do my job, or there are issues within the team. So how do you escalate that? Do you go to the direct line report within finance and then all the way to the CFO, and then from the CFO all the way to the CTO and back into engineering to fix it? Or should we become a lot more comfortable with loose lines and establishing channels where information can propagate really, really quickly from the edge of the system all the way to the central hub?
Yeah, it's something where I'm not struggling. It's not happening that much currently, but it has been happening. And to be honest, what works best is when the analyst from another department goes directly to an engineer or an analyst in data and algorithms, the data team. They tend to just work together and they solve the problem and off it goes. What works badly is when it gets escalated, including to me, right? I'm like, no, they can't do that. They should have gone through process. No, I block it. And so they actually don't tell me half the time now, and they just go and help each other out. So as usual, it's
Directly,
managers who are the problem. The actual guys doing the work are fantastic. Right. Yeah. So those loose connections, those informal connections, as long as you can keep the fragmentation below a certain threshold. My experience is that can normally be worked through by the people doing the work, like the engineers, the analysts. They can actually solve those problems for the most part.
I wanted to take a big magnifying lens and go and really look into the details of those cracks, gaps, and issues that we mentioned before.
Good.
I think you said something really interesting. You said there are issues with data fragmentation at the data level. So the raw ingredient that comes in, numbers, units of measures, a whole bunch of other stuff. Then there's issues at the level of the information and knowledge, and then the interpretation. What people see when they look at a feature or a column or a row in a spreadsheet. How do you go about fixing those? Who should own each of those differences? And what are some of the stories there?
It's been one of our big things. So very briefly, obviously I spoke about we created a data warehouse. And that took a long time. But to really then promote the use of that data warehouse required to implement definitions, implement common across the business definitions. So what's a new customer? What's a sale? What's an order? Like really basic questions, right? And I should have known this better than anyone. And I was a bit blind to it. I kind of knew there'd be some like little bits, but I wildly underestimated how significant were the gaps in understanding what those basic terms were. Like what's an order, right? You would think that is an unambiguous, objective thing, but it's not. When you go about trying to create a cohesive data warehouse, set of data that then clearly formalizes a single definition, it causes a lot of problems, right? So engineers just want the answer, right? We want to know the answer. So the data engineers will go, well, who do I email? Who do I ask what the order is? And of course, what happened was that people didn't know. And when you looked around the existing reporting and operations, there were probably half a dozen different definitions. This really bogged us down. And that might sound silly to people, but I said order, right? So is an order, what if you cancel an order? Is that still an order? What if you cancel it before anything else happens? Like it's like we have a subscription service, as I mentioned. What does happen is that people leave open their subscription. They leave it open, and then they get a ping in the morning saying, "Oh, your order's recurred," from the bank, because they've obviously ignored our emails that have gone through that lead up to it, and they call up and they go, "Oh, I don't want this order. It's cancelled." It's fine, right? Like maybe it didn't even go through on the credit card. It never went to the warehouse and all that sort of. Is that really an order? What about if we sometimes have split an order because of a stock issue, right, into two orders? Is that two orders or is that one order?
Or the same order?
Like you see what I mean? Broadly, it's the same number. Broadly, we've created 15,000 orders on a day, but was it 15,010 or was it 15,090? right? And that starts to matter, especially when our mission and vision in the data team is to operationalize this data. So between that, there's 80 customers who might be being sent an email saying, hey, you've just had your third order. Isn't that awesome? Here's a free gift, or no, I didn't create an order or whatever. So anyway, we went round and round in circles on this for a while. And what worked is working. Is we went through a process of really defining. What we decided is we needed a single owner for every single definition in the business, right? That's a huge task, okay? And there's a bunch of issues that go along with it. But to start with, we had to get the buy-in. This was a good idea. And there was a lot of resistance. I wouldn't say resistance, actually. A lot of concern on this topic from the executives, because they're like, well, it's actually quite hard to sometimes understand what the concern was, but there was a lot of concern. So what we ended up doing was we divided up everything into like a business domain. Okay, so a delivery obviously is in the realm of supply chain. So hence the head of supply chain, the executive in charge of supply chain, was the owner of most of the delivery metrics, right? So how many days did it take a delivery to occur? Which again sounds really simple, but do you include weekends? Do you divide by 24 and take only positive numbers, or is it like calendar days? If it arrives at 11 p.m. on Monday night and is delivered at 8 a.m. Tuesday morning, is that 1 day or 2 days or 0 days, right? I don't know. So anyway, all that sort of stuff. And then the other trick was really just communicating over and over and over again that owning the definition did not give anyone authority over all the operations that relate to that definition. Okay, so marketing own the definitions most of the definitions relating to new customers, like customers by default, but especially new customers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything to do with a customer is in the under the umbrella of the marketing function, right? So product operations, they all have a play in that. So making that, just reiterating that message again and again and again, that really helped. And then we had a few sessions, and the executives got really into it after a while. It was actually great. So, and it's been very, very helpful for everyone. Side benefit, some of these terms have finally got definitions after 10 or 11 years or whatever it is. So we're actually starting to speak in a common language across the business. And now what we're doing in the data team is implementing a lot of these definitions. What we're also doing, incidentally, is implementing as close as we can to the definition. So part of the thing is that if you own the definition, you can change it anytime you want. That doesn't necessarily trigger an engineer to go and re-implement it. We will, good faith, go and re-implement it as soon as we can. But there can be a gap between what the formal definition is and what the implementation is. But for us, it means it's fantastic, because now there is a single implementation of that definition at any given time. People are talking common language. It's cohesive. If one department says this customer's lapsing and someone else says no, they're not lapsing, it's like, well, hang on, there's something wrong here. It's not just different interpretation. It should be in the database. Let's have a look. Who owns that definition? Have we implemented it correctly? Yeah. Okay. Well, then there should be an objective answer to this. So that's working quite well.